All right, let's go e4, e5. We might diversify our openings a little bit as we get to 1600, but for now, we're keeping the basics. Wow, he's already stumped. Knight c3. Ooh, we might have to play against the Vienna, because I've obviously played the Vienna from white's perspective a lot, but not as much from black's perspective. So here, you want to go knight f6, right? You can also go knight c6, but it's more accurate to play knight f6. Okay, d3. So this is I've seen this before. It's obviously not an ambitious system. And generally, the way that I've seen white play this is going d3 and then g3. Because this, of course, closes in the bishop. So clearly not something that we should be afraid of. And essentially, black can take two approaches in this position. The first is sort of the developmental approach. We could just go knight c6, whatever, bishop c5. But we can also take the sort of more principled approach. And what do I mean by that? What move could we play if we wanted to really take it to white for playing a relatively passive move? Yeah, of course we could play d5. And if you count the defenders, okay, 1, 2, 1, 2. So if everything is traded on d5, we already know from our time playing the 4-knight Scotch that trade essentially benefits black. Let's take the more principled approach in this game. Let's go d5. Much like we do in the Philidor with the white pieces. You know, if white plays passively, we strike at the center. Now, of course, the choice for our opponent is e takes d5 or a move like knight f3. We'll see what they do. E takes d5. Okay, knight takes d5. What am I waiting for? Knight f3. Yeah, so this is almost a reverse 4-knight Scotch with the move d3 thrown in. No, of course, we want to go knight c6 here. We don't particularly want to take on c3 in this position. You might say, well, doesn't this ruin white's pawn structure? Well, it kind of does, but I've talked about this on many occasions. This particular pawn structure is really not that bad for white. Why am I saying that? Because after knight c3 bc, you're letting white control a lot of these key central squares with their pawns. So there's no need to release the tension with knight takes c3. Bishop d2. Very passive play by our opponent. Yeah, he's playing this passively, probably bishop d2, bishop e2. But this is actually quite an instructive moment because we need to decide where to develop our bishops. And I think what a lot of players tend to assume is that the more advanced, the better, right? So probably a lot of you are thinking, oh, we should go bishop g4 and bishop b4. Or maybe bishop c5 and bishop f5. But that's not necessarily true. In fact, I don't like the move bishop g4. Why not? Because after bishop b2, there's a certain tension that's created between the bishops that actually threatens something. So after bishop g4, bishop b2, what does white actually threaten? Very good, guys. Knight takes c5. Bishop g4, bishop b2 threatens knight takes c5. Very typical tactic. And so I'm going to make a move here that most of you are probably not even considering. We're going to play... I'm going to play bishop b7. And I don't know how to make this point in the best possible way, but the primary function of developing your dark-squared bishop is to castle. You see what I'm saying? So putting this bishop on c5 or putting it on b4 is not particularly effective. If you put it on c5, you kind of run into the move knight e4 or even knight a4. So I quite like the positioning of the bishop on e7. Now, by the same exact logic, if we're trying to play as solidly as possible and develop our pieces on invulnerable squares, where should this bishop go? Bishop e6, exactly. Bishop e6, reinforcing the knight, and look how nicely our bishops are stationed. This bishop is preventing the knight from jumping out to g5. This other bishop is still on this diagonal, and it's reinforcing the knight. a3, yeah, very, very passive play by white. So we can just continue sort of making improvements to our position. What do I mean by that? Well, what low-hanging fruit can we pull out here? And actually, the move a3, it potentially prepares b4. It potentially prepares b4. So, I've changed my mind. I actually don't particularly like allowing b4 because if white plays b4, then he's going to be threatening b5. And then our e5 pawn might get a little bit weak. So let's play a5. Let's prevent let's prevent b4. Let's try to put the squeeze on white. Can we open the center here? Well, we already kind of have. I don't really know what you mean by that. I mean, you can't really go e4. So we don't need to worry about doing anything else to the center. We can certainly play the move f5. I see a lot of you are suggesting f5. I was actually thinking in a different direction. I was thinking in the direction of going queen up to d7 in order to connect the rooks and prepare potential sacrifices against h3 in the event that our opponent castles. But of course f5 is also a completely legitimate move. The only thing that I don't always love about playing f5 is that it, of course, very slightly weakens the e5 pawn, because later on you won't have the possibility of going f6. Queen c1. What is the purpose of this move? Probably to prepare knight g5 would be my guess. So, yeah, h6, or, even the move f6 here. I would even play f6. Because not only are we preventing knight g5, but we're also reinforcing the e5 pawn. I know what a lot of you are probably thinking is, wait a minute, like, how do I know when f6 is a safe move and when it's a weakening move? When should I follow Ben Feingold's advice? Well, again, as with everything of this sort, it's a case-by-case thing, and when your opponent is this passive, think about what it is that f6 actually weakens. Mostly it weakens this diagonal. Well, does white have a bishop on this diagonal? Can white even put a bishop on this diagonal? No and no. So, and, in addition, we already have a bishop on this diagonal, so if you just look at the position, it's quite clear that f6 doesn't really weaken anything. Yeah, it closes the bishop, but again, our bishop can always reposition to c5, so I'm not worried about this bishop being bad. It's got plenty of space. Let's go queen d7 now. Let's go queen d7. We're eyeing the pawn. You guys are obviously by now very familiar with the bishop takes h3 type of sacrifice, which is why you shouldn't play h3 nonchalantly in such positions. Especially when you're very passive, you can fall victim to this kind of sacrifice. And, whoa, h4. This is, I have to say, white is playing badly, but it's not that easy to punish this, because white is actually quite solid. So, when you see a move like h4, which is incredibly strange, it's important to approach it methodically and ask yourself, well, what specifically seems to be the drawback of this move? What exactly is this weakening? Because all of us are looking at this move and saying that's weird, but let's be more specific than that. Well, what exactly is it doing? Yeah, so it weakens the g4 square. If you think about the action of playing h4, well, it weakens the g4 square. Is that important? Well, it might be, because now we can put a bishop on g4, and guess what? That bishop on g4 cannot really be attacked by a pawn. Now, didn't I previously say that I didn't like putting the bishop on g4? Well, yes, I did, but the circumstances were different then. If you remember, we didn't have a queen on d7. Why is that important? Because the queen on d7 is going to be reinforcing the bishop on g4. What else is different? White's queen used to be on d1. The queen on d1 x-rays the bishop. Now the queen is on c1, so we don't really have to worry about any knight takes e5 related tactics. Does that make sense? So this is a good example of being concrete, right? I didn't like bishop g4 earlier, but now this move puts the bishop on really an outpost, and we could even play h5 ourselves. I'm not ruling that out. We absolutely can play h5 ourselves just to secure that bishop, to strap it in completely. And here's the thing. White is so passive here that we can get away with a lot of stuff that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to get away with. So a move like h5, under a completely different set of circumstances, I probably wouldn't even consider. Here, I just judge that white doesn't have the capacity to exploit a lot of these weaknesses. Queen d1 is not a bad move. Okay, so we have a couple of options. Now, white is not threatening anything. Actually, he is. He is threatening knight takes e5, if you think about it, and I'll show this after the game. But knight takes e5 is a tactical threat here, which wins a pawn. So the logical thing to do would be to defend the bishop. Yeah, I kind of like f5. So we played f6 in order to defend the e5 pawn, but remember that white has already played h4. So the benefit of playing f5, the downside of it is that it weakens the e5 pawn, but the benefit is that it reopens the bishop. Let's play it, and it puts immediate pressure on this h4 pawn. It puts immediate pressure on this h4 pawn. The reason knight takes e5 was a threat is because after knight takes e5, he plays bishop takes g4. Don't worry about it. I'll show it after the game. Put it out of your mind right now. Let's focus on the game. I promise that I'll show it afterward. g3. Whoa. More weaknesses created on the king side. Another understandable move. I mean, white is reinforcing the h4 pawn. But again, whenever there's a pawn move like this, we ask ourselves, well, what does it weaken? Well, in this case, it weakens the h3 square. So the move bishop h3 comes to mind, but what exactly does it accomplish? Well, after rook e1, I'm afraid that it doesn't accomplish all that much. I quite like the positioning of the bishop on g4. So I think that rather than jumping to conclusions and doing anything drastic, I think that we should simply improve our position. Well, f4, but f4 still allows knight takes e5, folks. f4 still allows knight takes e5 because it removes the defender on our bishop. And that leads to a highly complicated position, and I don't want to allow such complexities. Now, when I say improve my position, well, what do I mean by that? Well, we can think about which aspects of the position we can reinforce. One thing I've previously mentioned is the pawn on e5 is a little bit too weak for my taste. I want to be able to move this knight without having to worry about losing the pawn. What nice way do we have of improving that pawn without reducing our general piece coordination? Not bishop d6, folks, because that blunders the knight. That severs the connection between the queen and the knight. Not bishop d6, but bishop f6. Bishop f6, I think, is a nice move. It defends the pawn. And now we can bring the rook to e8. And slowly but surely, we can perhaps prepare e5 to e4. A lot of you guys are proposing the immediate rook e8, which I also like, but I think this move is more flexible because maybe we can put our rook on d8. Right? You always want to start with the most immediate and the most flexible move. Here, we're reinforcing the pawn with the least value piece, and I always say that. If you can accomplish a task with a bishop rather than with a rook, then you often should. You want to keep your most valuable pieces for the most important tasks. So that's actually a very seldom talked about rule, is that you have something you want to accomplish. You want to defend a pawn, you want to maneuver a piece somewhere. Do it with the least value piece so that you can leave your rooks and your queen for more important stuff. So I love rook e8 now. I love rook e8. Let's do it. Let's get our rook into the game. Completing, essentially, the picture. We have perfect piece coordination. Now we can start thinking gradually about taking more concrete action, such as f4 or e4, but we don't have to hurry with that at all. Okay, knight g1. Yeah, strange play by our opponent. Knight g1 is pretty solid move, I have to say. Offering the bishop trade. Now, we have a bishop trade, potentially. No, this position, I see somebody saying I would beat Magnus from this position. No, white's position is not that bad. And the reason I say that is because as passive as white's position looks, he doesn't really have that many targets, right? Everything is sort of well defended. This kind of style is not that easy to play against, even for me. Okay, so should we take the bishop or not? And again, I keep tricking you guys because I asked the question, you say no just because I asked. Yeah, we should take it. Because if we allow white to take on g4, then what square are we going to give white at the end of the line? We're going to give white a very important square for one of their pieces, which is the e4 square for his knight. Knight is going to come to e4. So, unfortunately, we have to part ways with our bishop, but that's okay. Well, it gives up the e4 square. I'll show this after the game. I'm surprised he's thinking knight g2 should be automatic. Knight g2 is going to follow, and then we can start thinking about our response. And I might have to speed up just a little bit because I can anticipate this being a bit of a longer game. Queen takes e2. Wow. Very surprising. Very surprising. Queen takes e2. Well, this seems to walk right into knight d4. Although the queen, I suppose, can drop back to d1. I mean, let's go. Let's put our knight on d4. I can't resist that. I'm sorry. I can't resist knight d4. And you know, I think this question gets asked of me a lot. Is like, how do you know when to make these general improving moves and then when to press on the gas pedal and go for a win? Well, again, a lot of people asking that question are hoping for a formula or an algorithm, and I can't promise anything like that. Nothing like that exists. but you just kind of get a feeling. You get a feeling like, okay, I've made all these improving moves. I need to start pouncing. Like, the time has come. And I'm getting that feeling now. So what does it mean to press on the gas pedal here? How can we start playing more concretely against White's weaknesses? Well, we can try to play f4. Yeah, the move f4 definitely comes to mind as a way to start breaking down White's defensive construction on the king side. Now, I think about this and say, wait a minute, doesn't this give up this monster square on e4? And it does. But I just feel like you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, and I feel like, that's not the most important part about the position. Yeah, we do give up the e4 square, but hopefully our attack is going to be worth it. Okay. No, this guy's good. I have to say, this might backfire on me. The way that this game is going, I don't have a great feeling about that things. So, I'm going to make a confession here. I had in mind a bishop sacrifice that I thought was winning, but I just realized that I missed something, which honestly calls into question the strength of the move f4. Now, ideally, we would want to advance this pawn either to f3. Now, ideally, we want the f-file to be open. Now, for the f-file to be open, we need to move our bishop out of the way. This bishop on f6 is in the way right now. Do you guys see what I'm saying? It's interfering with the rook. Get it out of there. Just shoo. Away. Remember that the bishop is a long-range piece, which means that it's doing the same thing from d8 that it was doing from f6. This is a concept a lot of beginners in particular struggle with. This bishop is aiming at h4 just as effectively as it would have been doing from f6. So do not be afraid to make retreating moves with the queen and the bishop because they are long-range pieces. That's exactly what they're meant for, to attack from behind. c3, great move. Where should our knight go? Where should our knight go? Well, our knight should go somewhere such that it continues to exert some sort of pressure on White's king side. Well, let's survey the squares. Clearly, knight f5 is the only logical move because it's, now you can start thinking about potential piece sacrifices, bishop takes h4 being one of them. And you can also potentially start thinking about a rook lift, rook e6, rook g6, although, if you look carefully, rook e6, unfortunately, is not possible due to knight c5 with a fork, so maybe a little bit later, maybe after b6. Where to put the queen if opponent goes knight c5? Queen c6, simply queen c6. I don't understand why knight c5 is so scary. Just queen up to c6. Okay, some of you... Okay, knight f3. Now, this is a high-level statement, but I noticed something interesting about this position. Do you guys see the queen and the rook being on forkable squares? So my brain immediately goes knight e3. Now, obviously, there's a pawn on f2. I know that. So then I think, what if we play f takes g3, f takes g3, knight fe3? That wins an exchange. Well, it doesn't. You have to calculate further than that. How can White try to save the exchange after knight e3? Who can tell me really quickly? Because we're going to make this move anyway. Actually, no, we're not. There's a beautiful... Oh my god, there's a crazy tactic there. We can play queen f7. No, we are going to play it. There are some crazy tactics there. Queen b3. So White can play bishop takes e3, knight takes e3, and then queen b3 check. Now we're going to play this anyway. Oh, he plays knight takes g3. Yeah, but now our move is very simple. Now the attack has paid specific dividends. Now the attack we can cash in for finally something specific. Well, not bishop h4. Why bishop h4? Because then he takes on f5 and takes on h4, knight h4. Yeah, knight h4, bishop h4, and now we're up a pawn. The king is kind of in shambles, and now I feel more confident. Queen h5 is probably the best move for White, but we'll deal with it. We can always just drop our bishop back to d8. That is one hell of an exposed king. You guys probably see that knight f4 is very much a potential idea for black, yeah? Because bishop takes f4, e takes f4, chases the knight out of g3, and the knight on g3 is essentially the last defender. Good move. Let's get our bishop the hell away again. Shoo the bishop, get back, right? Notice I'm absolutely unafraid to make these retreating moves with my bishop. Because I don't want my bishop, the last thing I want to do is put the bishop on f6 where it's going to be in the way of the rook. So do not judge moves based on how much they retreat a piece. That's not a metric that I use to judge whether a move is good. I don't care whether it's a retreating move or an advancing move. I think that whole concept is overrated. if I may be honest. This whole, it's a retreating move. I've had some students who've had a lot of struggles with just retreating moves. And I've tried to tell them, like, don't think of a move in those terms. Think of a move based on what it accomplishes. Rook e1. Well, what should we do now? I think now we should follow through with our general plan. I've already kind of given away the move. Well, I don't like rook e6, folks, because it doesn't threaten rook h6. Because there's a bishop on d2. So I think after rook e6, white can actually take on e5. Instead, I think the time has come for us to reposition our knight to f4 and essentially force bishop takes f4. And if he moves his queen, then the queen comes to h3 with mate. Can white play queen h4? No, because we have a little bishop here on d8 that's guarding that square. Sarfu, thank you for the prime. Now, we can take with the rook here and try to lift it to h4, but there's a specific reason why I don't like that. And there's a specific reason why I like taking with a pawn, because it's with tempo. It attacks the knight, and if you look around the board, you might also see that the d3 pawn is hanging, so potentially we could try to take that pawn. We could also try to lift this rook to h6 on the next move. This is looking very grim for white. So for instance, if white plays knight e4, notice that we have eliminated white's bishop on d2. As a good practice, anytime a trade happens, take a couple of moments to ask yourself to refresh your understanding of ideas. Which ideas are now possible? Which ideas are still impossible? So the idea of a rook lift now is a lot more appealing. But amazingly, rook e6 still doesn't work. This guy is so resilient. Rook e6 is still bad for another specific tactical reason. What is it? And queen takes d3 also fails to another tactic. God damn. There's a fork. Rook e6 walks into knight c5. Queen takes d3 walks into a discovered check, knight f6 check. And that line goes on, but it doesn't work. Let me think. So, I'm going to try to walk you through how I think about this position. Well, what is the sexiest idea that we have? Probably rook e6, rook h6, right? So this is the one that we want to prepare. I care a lot less about taking this pawn than I do about lifting this rook. I want to get this rook lift to move. Well, why doesn't it move? Why doesn't it work? Well, because of knight c5. So can we prevent knight c5? Let's go b6. Let's at least try it. I hope I'm not blundering anything here, because he's got ideas here for sure, but I think our king is safe. I mean, chess can be a very logical game if you just go through the process of just thinking about a position and thinking about what you want to accomplish and why you can't accomplish it. There's no reason that you can't make moves like this. I think a lot of people, they look at a move like b6 and think, oh, it's like a typical GM move, but it has a very specific logic to it. I identify my top priorities in the position, and then I ask myself, can I accomplish them? Identify obstacles, and voila. Those obstacles, I make them disappear. Let's go. Let's get our rook in motion. Now, this is not so simple, folks. You might notice that rook h6 is not a threat because of his excellent last move. Why not? Because of queen takes h6, and we will not be able to recapture because we're pinned. Okay, but he moves his queen. It's a moot point. Okay, let's get a rook to h6. Okay. So, the queen f3 was amazing, actually. Yeah, now I think he found the best way to deal with our attack. The thing is, king f1 is not a threat because of rook h3, and then we're going to win d3. I think that we should probably take this opportunity to make some sort of general improving move, such as bishop e7, or maybe king h8. This knight is really good. I'm struggling to find a particularly satisfying one. Maybe c5, just expanding and fixing the pawn on d3. I like the move c5. Let's go c5. Let's go c5 in order to prevent d4. Do you see why I'm doing that? To keep this pawn weak. And then the bishop could even reposition to c7 later, perhaps to defend this pawn if necessary. Now, you might look at this and say, well, wait a minute, doesn't it create weaknesses? Doesn't it create a backward pawn on b6? Yes, it does. But as we climb in rating, I want you guys to start thinking of this more as a tit for tat. Like, chess is a big game of tit for tat. Okay, you make this concession, but you gain something in return. So don't just stop there. Say, oh, well, this gives this up, so we shouldn't play. Well, that's not necessarily true. Now here, rook h1 is another great move. We should go back to g6. We should at least keep our rook alive. Okay, now I have a follow-up idea, ladies and gentlemen, which is to get this rook onto d8 so that it pressures the d3 pawn. Now, in order to do that, we have to move our bishop out of the way. So I think the time has come for us to play bishop e7. Yeah, we could have also played bishop c7, but I want to keep this bishop relevant. I don't want it to be staring at the pawn yet. Getting back to e2. I'm also kind of getting outplayed here. I'm going to be totally frank. Let's go queen b5. Let's hit the pawn on b2. Is he underrated? He is very underrated, yes. Very, very underrated. How does it drop the f4 pawn? We have a rook on f8. Okay, now we're going to hit him where it hurts with c4. And I'm playing a little bit faster here because I've got 3 minutes. The point of this move, I want white to play d4 so that the knight on e4 loses the support of the pawn. My plans have changed. Rather than going after the pawn because the pawn is so well defended, I now want to go after the knight. I want to go after the knight. Now, how am I going to go about doing that? Well, one thing we can do is put the rook on e8 rather than f8 so that it x-rays the knight on e4. Then we can try to move the bishop again and create a pin. Does that make sense? So by playing c4, I'm provoking d4, which I assume he's going to play. Then I'm going to move my rook from f8 to e8, and I'm going to put the pressure on the knight. Yes, it gives up the f4 pawn, but I care less about this pawn. I think then we can move our bishop out of the way, and we can create serious problems against his knight, concretely. Like rook e8, rook e6. Maybe rook e6 is actually the best move after d4. Okay, actually, now that somebody pointed this out, rook e6 might be the way to do it. This might be the secret sauce. Let's do it. Let's play rook e6. Wow, instantly. Okay, let's get our queen to f5 maybe, just to attack the knight. That's right. I did learn mayonnaise. Okay, so we're attacking this knight. I'm anticipating rook bf1. This is the test of whether this guy watches the stream. Nifa, thank you for the prime. And Kevin, 41 months. Okay, let's go rook e8. Rook e2. Very good. Doubling rooks. Wait a minute. What if we... I don't really have a minute, but what if we play bishop takes a3? Give me a second. Bishop a3, rook h5, queen g6. No, it probably doesn't work. g5. Rook takes e4, though. Ooh. Bishop takes a3. I don't see a refutation to it. I don't see a refutation to bishop takes a3. Okay, let's make him prove it. I'm sure there's something, but let's see what it is. You won anyway. Okay, well, why don't we just move our bishop back? This is a very strange player. I've never seen him play like this. Okay, we could have taken the pawn on b2, but I don't want to adventure. I want to keep our bishop safe, yeah? Understood? Makes sense? Just want to keep our bishop somewhere near our king. I didn't want to take b2. I didn't know what was wrong with that move, but it felt too risky. King c1. Yeah, but now we're up 2 pawns. Now I'm better. Now, you know what I think we should do, folks? Is go... I think we should go king h8 here. Just to get our king outside of the range of any potential knight checks on f6. So, for instance, a move like d5 now is not dangerous because we can just take the pawn, whereas earlier, he would have had knight f6 check as a follow-up, winning the queen. Prophylaxis, yeah? Then maybe we can play h6 to create some luft, because by playing king h8, we walked right into a potential back rank problem. That should also make sense to everybody. We've walked into a potential back rank problem, so if we have a chance to go h6, I'll be happy. Okay, it goes there. Now I think we should trade everything and go b5 to defend the pawn on c4. Let's do it. Let's go b5 and let's defend the pawn on c4. This should make a lot of sense to everybody, what we're doing here. And now it's going to be close because this pawn is extremely dangerous and our position is very, very passive. But we have one big asset in this position. Ooh, that looks like a really bad move. Wait a minute, that looks like a terrible move. Queen d3 looks interesting. Let me think. That's definitely wrong. No, I think we just take it, folks. I think we can just take it. Yeah, but oh my god, it's so tricky, actually. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna explain why after the game. I promise. I'm gonna explain why after the game. But I'm gonna take here, simply. I know it's a weird decision, but now I'm gonna go a4. Start pushing this pawn. Yeah, I know, guys. I know they're tempting moves. Just hold on, please. I will explain it after the game, right? I promise. This doesn't worry me. And you know what we're going to do now? Let's start pushing the other pawn. Let's go. h4, h3, h2. Boom, boom, boom. Now, you might say, well, why am I not pushing this pawn? Well, he's got a knight on a1 that's going to be blockading. And I feel like I'm pushing the pawn that's furthest away from his knight. So I feel like this pawn has the highest chance of actually promoting. Probably our hardest game of the speedrun, assuming I win. He resigns, but it's a pretty generous resignation. Jeez. Strange game, I'll be completely honest. I guess just the style of play was weird. Like, White was playing like I heard somebody say like a tortoise. And that's kind of true. Like, he was just hunkering down very close, keeping all the pieces so close. And it was very hard to break through. It was very hard to break through. Okay. So, let's go over the game. I don't know. I've never really, and I'll be honest, I've never really seen anybody play like this. Very, very unique style. I guess like bishop d2, very passive opening. Bishop b7. Yeah, no groundless accusations. Like I said, I think he's legit. I think he's underrated. And I don't know what to say. It's just a strange style. We'll leave it at that, folks. We don't have to discuss this any further. We can still enjoy the game and derive instructive value from it. So bishop b2, bishop b6. So this is, yeah, guys, remember, I'm like 1500 plus now. We're not expecting people to just roll over. This is a 15-minute time control. I'm expecting people to start playing quite well. Now, it's also, the way he played is definitely strange, but strange doesn't automatically mean that he cheated. Okay. a5. Preventing b4. Queen c1, f6. Why is it passive when he goes bishop d2 and it's principled when you go bishop e7, asks Dearest Mother. That's a great question. So that seems like a contradiction. Am I contradicting myself by saying this is passive while this is not passive? No. So here's the thing. When I say that White played passively, I'm not just referring to this. I'm referring to the overall scope of White's moves. It all starts with the move d3. If you really want to know what's passive, this is the passive move because it blocks the bishop. And it's the combination of the moves that White plays, like here, bishop d2 and bishop e2. If you just compare our setups, right, we've got a bigger chunk of the center. The bishop on e7 is a cog in the machine. It's preventing the knight from coming to g5, whereas the bishop on d2 and the bishop on e2 are just kind of sitting there, right? And also he's playing White, and when White plays like this, it's just undoubtedly passive. When Black plays like this, Black often gets more of the benefit of the doubt when you play passively because it's a defensive setup, but with White, you're just not supposed to play like that. Okay, so first important moment, ladies and gentlemen, is after queen d1, we wanted to establish why knight takes c5 was a threat. So let's take a random move, such as, not rook d8, rook d8 actually defends against it, rook e8. So the reason a lot of you were arguing with me is because you said after knight takes e5, bishop takes g4, Knight takes g4. It looks like the queen defends everything, but it doesn't. The queen is overloaded, guys. Knight takes d5. You should see this. This is pretty elementary, my dear Watson. Queen takes d5, queen takes g4. And white wins the pawn. Okay, so anytime you have a bishop on g4, a bishop on e2, and the bishop on g4 is undefended, I literally mean it. Anytime there's a bishop on b4, a bishop on d2, remember that the knight can move away. It can take something. You have to watch for that entire suite of tactics. Right? This is where, well, what if knight takes c5, knight takes c3? Then I thought knight takes d7. Knight takes d1, bishop takes g4, and white is winning because everything is hanging. So this is how you develop pattern recognition. You sort of remember, oh, this has happened. I need to check for these kinds of tactics. And as I've shown many times before, even strong grandmasters tend to miss this sort of stuff. This is from one of my games against an IM. I've shown this game before. Watch what happens. This is a classical game against a 2350 FIDE. So bishop e7, queen d2, knight f6, and guess what move he plays here? Bishop g5. Now, what did I do in this position? Now, do not just automatically say knight takes e4. Actually think about it. This is a classic. This is a classic blunder. Very good. Very good. Knight takes d5. And this is a concept you just have to know. And the point is that if he takes on d5, then we take on g5. And if bishop takes e7, then that very same knight takes that bishop and we're up a pawn. Now you might say, well, why is knight takes d4 bad? Knight takes e4 doesn't win a pawn because what white does here is plays knight takes e4. Now, you can't take the bishop because that very same knight takes the bishop. But after f takes e4, white first takes on e7. Well, obviously you have to take back. And after f takes e4, white is fine. Understood? So both knight takes d5 and knight takes e4 has to be monitored. Now, does that mean you should never put your bishop on g5 or b4? Of course not. That's not what I'm saying. Just got to be careful. I know a lot of you probably have blundered this before. Okay, so that's why we played f5. We played f5 to reinforce the bishop. Now, on to the next important moment. So, knight g1 was an excellent move, actually. This one I underestimated. Queen takes e2 was very strange. And let me tell you what my oversight actually was. So, I thought that I could sack the bishop and then play the move f3. And from a distance, I evaluated this position as being, at the very least, a lot of fun to play. Now, what is the zen behind the sacrifice? What is the purpose of this? Well, the purpose of this is to play queen g4, as I'm sure everybody sees, and to deliver a lobster pincer checkmate on g2. But what I miss here is the very calm knight h3. And after knight h3, queen g4, white is in time to put a rook on g1, and black's attack fizzles. There's just, look at this. There's nothing to attack with. And white has gotten a lot of pieces into the defense, the bishop coming to g5. And unfortunately, with this monster knight sitting on e4, I think black is running out of gas. So I misevaluated this. I thought we could sack on h4. And so we end up going bishop back to d8, which is actually a very good move, I think. Bogdan says that's still winning. Are you sure about that? I don't think it is. I don't think this is still winning. I think this is very unclear. I mean, for instance, unless you're looking with an engine, then I stand corrected. But even bishop g5 forces the queen back. Now you can go knight g3 and force the queen back even further. No, Ogden, I think, respectfully, I disagree. After knight g3, I think white is better. White is better. No, he's 1400 blitz. Yeah, no, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. And it doesn't work because you don't have enough attackers. So we end up going bishop d8, c3. Knight drops back to f5 to pressure these pawns. After knight f3, very important to, obviously, to pay attention to, I've told you this a million times, forkable pieces. Anytime you have a situation where you can get a knight onto a forking square. And again, even if there's a pawn on f2, you have to pay attention to that because you never know how the situation might change. Now, I was fully expecting this to happen, and now, as many of you indicated, white can get out of the fork by playing queen b3 check. And here, there's an amazing moment. I'm going to give you guys a very difficult question. How should black play? And if I calculated this correctly, there's only one correct move here. It's a trick question. There are some incredible tactics here. Now, you're in check, folks. You're in check. How should black react to the check? Actually, I think there's two possible moves, but they're very similar in their ideas. So, essentially, let me walk you through how I thought about this position. Well, the first thing that I notice here is that white's rook is kind of effed, because if white goes rook f2, then the knight swings back to g4 with a fork, right? So, and the rook cannot go to e1 because we simply take the knight on f3. Now, I know we're in check, so it follows from that logically that king h8 should be winning. But king h8 walks into a brilliant tactic, and the ingredients of that tactic is the weak back rank, the fact that there's a queen on b3, and the fact that there's a knight on f3. White can play knight takes e5. Now you might say, well, let's take the rook with check, and then we can take the knight. But no, because of rook takes f1. And hopefully everybody can see the issue, which is that if you take the knight, you get back rank mated. If you take the rook, then you lose your queen. And if you move your queen, then you walk right into knight f7 check. And this is at the very least good for white. I mean, you probably have to take this knight, otherwise you're going to get destroyed. So, having calculated that, rather than abandoning the whole line, I said, wait a minute, what if we cover the check? And then I spotted the move queen f7. This is a simple move. It forces a queen trade. Obviously, nothing to speak of here. White has to trade. After rook takes f7, that's it. We eliminate the danger. And because we attack the rook, we win an exchange. Rook f2, there's still knight g4 check. Rook e1, there's still rook takes f3, simultaneously defending the knight. Understood? So, because of these tactics, I think this works out for black. Knight takes g3, knight takes h4. Now, I think our opponent correctly gave away the pawn rather than the exchange. And I will show you one moment where the computer indicated I made a mistake. Why does it force a queen trade, asks Krolauer. Let's go back. So, Krolauer asks, no, it doesn't, you're right. You're absolutely right. In fact, white should play queen takes b7. But what I meant to say is, if white wants to try to avoid losing an exchange, white should trade queens. I agree that white's best approach is to accept that he's losing an exchange and take the most for it that he can. But what I was saying is, like, if white wants to try to avoid losing an exchange, then they should take on f7. Okay, so knight g3, knight h4, knight f4, we force the trade. Now we play b6 to prevent knight c5, and here, after rook e6, queen f3, rook h6, king g2, I missed a far more decisive approach to the position. So I decided to play it slow and just start making surface level improvements. But there was a very counterintuitive move here that led to a far more decisive advantage, and that was g5. Instead of b6, try f3 WTF. As in, why didn't... What kind of idiot am I not to play it? Okay, and f3 is so strong because... Like, let's say rook g1. I guess rook f4. No, but then knight f6. Yeah, probably f3 was better. So... But I played b6 because I really wanted to lift the rook up. Of course this is winning, empty go board. You don't... I'm not saying this isn't winning. And perhaps f3 is better. I'm not sure what point you're trying to make. So here the move g5 is very strong. We want to play g4. And essentially we're forcing king f1. But now we have this old move, rook h3, which I mentioned, which wins the d3 pawn. So that was something I completely missed. I didn't even think about g5. Like, I didn't realize that this pawn goes so fast. I didn't want to weaken my king like this. Just shows you how good computers are. G5. Just weaken your king like this and go for G4. Okay, so C5, rook H1. We don't trade rooks. We get our bishop to a good square. Queen B5 is a nice move, attacking B2. Why is king F1 forced? Because if king F1 isn't played, then we're going to go G4. Now you might be wondering, why is G4 so dangerous? Well, let's make a random move. Well, after G4, white gets steamrolled. Queen F2, you get forked. And if queen D1, I mean, black can even go G3 here. And start. Do you see how dangerous this is? The queen coming to H3. White's whole defensive construction has been dislodged and destroyed. So a lot of you are indicating I don't have access to the engine in live, but apparently he had some way to draw after queen b5. I don't think that's quite as important. I think black retains an advantage. I mean, we're up a pawn. You know, we're probing and poking and prodding, and I think this move c4 is very strong because we're isolating and weakening the knight. Now we're immediately redirecting our attention onto attacking this knight. King d2, queen f5, hitting the knight again. Now we pile up the pressure, and boom, bishop takes a3. Bishop takes a3. Ogden, you're making a lot of categorical statements. I wouldn't be so sure. Apparently I made a blunder a little bit later. You guys are saying, oh my god. No, oh my god, that's amazing. King h8 is a blunder because of knight d6. Look at this. And I did say that our back rank is weak, and I didn't see any back rank tactics. I did see this move. I did see this move. I swear. What I calculated was that after the trade, this is not checkmate. We have queen g8. Who sees what I'm missing? Who sees what I'm missing? I played a move automatically somewhere in that along that line. Yeah, you don't have to take on e6. Why gives a check first? Now, is this mate? No. Bishop f8. But wait a second. Takes. Takes queen g8. Yeah, and queen takes f4. And because of white's protected passer, I think white is doing okay here. Because white has this nasty passer, white is fine. This is a draw. Ridiculous line. I knew this concept existed, but man, I just didn't think about it. And by the way, if rook takes c2, folks, another very important detail. White to move. Who can tell me the best move? Who can tell me the best move? Yeah, knight d6 is a draw for that reason. It equalizes. Not take f5. Don't grab the queen just because you can. Black has two rooks for the queen. No, you take on e2. You see why? Because now black is forked. And you can only get one rook for the queen. So, yeah, sorry, king h8 was a blunder. Should have probably played h6 first. I should have probably made some luft initially. So in an attempt to play prophylactically, ironically, I actually walked into a tactic. Oh, and apparently I'm being told that a little bit earlier, after rook e8, white had the move knight g3. Which is a less impressive move because I saw it. I mean, I just thought I'd go queen f7. So I'm not sure what it is exactly that is so dangerous about this, but probably the computer will indicate some stuff. I mean, you guys, and this is a message to people watching on YouTube as well, you're welcome to analyze these games with an engine. I mean, you will unlock a lot of stuff that I've missed. I try to present the speedrun virtually without engines to give it the most instructive value, but you can derive a lot of your own instructive value by analyzing with an engine. Find my mistakes, figure out why they were mistakes, and you can learn that way. So don't limit yourself to what I say. Check my conclusions with an engine. Bishop takes a3. Does this move make sense to everybody? Exposing the attack on the knight. Rook e1, and maybe we could have taken b2. I don't know. Perhaps the engine will say that too. But well, if it's not a bishop sack, guys. Bishop b takes a3, rook takes e4. It's not a sack. It's just a discovered attack. It's just an easy discovered attack against the knight. Back to f8. King c1, king h8, missing knight d6, but after knight d2, this allows the rook trade. Now we defend the pawn, and now we're up 2 pawns. And our plan here ultimately is to push the h-pawn. After b3, a lot of you were screaming bishop a3 check, and I was about to play this move. Why didn't I play it? Because after king d1, first of all, this is not checkmate, ladies and gentlemen. This blunders the queen. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking c takes b3, knight takes b3, queen b1 check. But white's not going to take on the knight, and that's why I rejected this. I was worried about this move. If you cover with the bishop, then white can take on b3. Now, if the queen starts gallivanting around, well, the bishop's going to be hanging in the end. So you're not getting very far. So you can cover the queen. But amazingly, after queen takes b5, I just wasn't convinced that this is the most convincing way we can play. Like, I just didn't know whether this was entirely clear. Because this pawn is weak, white's got protected passers now. Again, I hope this makes sense, but I just wasn't confident that this is the most clear-cut approach. And so ultimately, that's why I decided simply to take and play a4. But here, I think white missed his last chance to complicate the game, which was to play knight c5. This had to be played. White has to keep the knight active. The point is that if you take twice, you get back rank mated. One other very important point, Hess makes this point all the time. In queen endgames, you can have a single pass pawn, and it can be 50 times stronger than like 5 other pass pawns. And this is a great example of that. You might say, well, we can just play h5 and black is 2 pawns up, but look at where white's pawn is. White's pawn is already on c6, so perhaps even white is playing for a win here. So here, we would have probably gone either a3 or h5, but it's still a game. Okay, knight a1, and after h5, he resigned, which is a totally valid resignation. This is over. We're just pushing our pawn all the way down to h1. There's nothing white can do. This d pawn is not going forward. The game is over. Corellauer, yeah, maybe queen c5 stops the pawn. I'm just trying to make a general point about this endgame not being easy to win. In general, queen endgames are one of the hardest endgames to win because of the amount of trickiness that exists in them. So regarding the engine, also to the YouTube crowd, I strongly advise against watching with an engine. Now, I can only advise, I can't force you, because that defeats the whole purpose. And you have plenty of opportunity to see how much I suck when I play Blitz. Like, you can follow an engine, you can see me making mistakes on every move. You already know that, like, I play like a human and I make lots of mistakes. But you gotta ask yourself, like, why are you watching? And when you watch with an engine, I think you immediately remove all of the instructive value, because it is then impossible to actually understand what it is that you can figure out on your own. Now, I said you can use the engine for instructive value, but I'm talking about after the game. Like, after the game, once you've analyzed it on your own, if you want to take a look with an engine, I think that's a great idea. But I would say if you want to, like, maximize learning, then you should just shut off the engine entirely and try to embrace the suck. You know, embrace the fact that you might struggle with some of these positions, and you might not understand something, and mistakes might go unnoticed. This was a great game. And there's a lot of stuff I didn't talk about. Like, I could talk more about the opening, but ultimately, there's going to be many more speedrun games. Good night. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.